Most of this week's devotionals have been about some of those really obscure and really strange passages in the Old Testament that, when we read them, our first reaction is to exclaim, "What?" But these sorts of passages aren't limited to the Old Testament. There are also a few in the New Testament, including one where Jesus pronounces a curse on a fig tree. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Saturday, July 2nd, 2022. We'll end the week with a relatively easy passage to understand, even though it sounds strange on the front end. The story goes, on the following day, that would be the day after Palm Sunday, as they came down from Bethany, he was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see whether perhaps he would find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He said to it, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard it. Now, in typical Mark fashion, Mark tells another story before returning to this one. Just for context, the writer of the Gospel of Mark frequently begins telling one story, then midway through tells another story, and then returns to the original story. He does this to allow each story to be a sort of commentary on the other. There's actually a technical term for this. It's called intercalation. One scholar calls it a literary sandwich, which probably makes it easier to remember. In this case, the middle story is the cleansing of the temple, in which Jesus drives out the money changers and merchants from the temple. The end of this story sees Jesus and the disciples leaving the city, to which they will return in the morning. So after this brief episode, Mark returns to the story of the fig tree. In the morning, as they passed by, they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. Then Peter remembered and said to him, "Rabbi, look, the tree that you cursed has withered." So our first reaction is to say, what did this fig tree do to deserve being cursed? Many commentators, and indeed Mark himself, have pointed out that if this event did indeed happen when Mark says it did, it would not be the right time of year for fig trees to bear their fruit. They bear fruit in late summer and early fall, not in early spring when this event takes place. So one of three things must be true here. Either Jesus is ignorant about fig trees and their annual growing cycle, which seems extremely unlikely, or else he's making another point and using the fig tree as a sort of sermon illustration, or else Mark, along with Matthew, who also tells this story, has taken the story and inserted it here for literary reasons. My money's on the second possibility. It strikes me as nonsensical to assume that a man like Jesus, who frequently uses the natural world in his teachings and in his parables, would be that ignorant of the fact that figs just don't produce their fruit in spring. Now, it is possible, but impossible to know for certain, that Matthew and Mark took a story about Jesus cursing a fig tree that was just the story passed down through the generations and placed it during Holy Week for literary and theological purposes. Possible. After all, Mark, the earliest of the Gospels to be written, was not even composed until something like 30 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. The writers simply were not producing what we would think of as historically accurate, day-by-day accounts of the ministry of Jesus. There's no reason to think that they wouldn't have taken liberties with the chronology of Jesus' ministry to weave a compelling theological account. But in this case, there's no particular reason to think that's what they've done here. Which leaves us with the idea that the fig tree is a sort of living metaphor for something or someone else. And indeed, it seems clear that Jesus is referring to the religious authorities in Jerusalem. That's what the middle story was all about. The point he's making is that the religious leaders then were all about the trappings of the faith, but not the substance. They could conduct religious services and make all the appropriate sacrifices in the temple, and they could be punctilious in keeping to the letter of the law, but they had lost track of what it was really all about, loving God and loving neighbor. And that's what it's still about. This story indeed continues to challenge us today to bear fruit for the kingdom by living lives of faithful service to God and to one another. When we return Monday, a brief 4th of July meditation. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.